to be a trainee estate agent. Thank you, but I've already been offered a job. They want me to go and be a branch manager in Coventry. I said, you're not ready for a branch manager in Coventry. Business never outpaces its leader. So that always sets the pace and the critical standards that everybody adheres to. But I think the elephant in the room, which we failed to address as a profession for so long, is the requirement for minimum standards of learning and a license to practice. Our industry has been dumbed down to the lowest common denominator, but the further that you drive it down, the less of the service that you're going to get, and you've got to be so up to speed with it in terms of what the future looks like. You won't lose your job to AI, but you're in danger of losing your job to somebody that will use AI better than you.
Welcome to the next episode of Estate Agent Showdown, and I'm absolutely I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Handford of Fine & Country. And we were just talking outside that we kind of know each other digitally. So this is the first time we've met, and I met him with a nice little handshake and looked up. I didn't realise you're quite as tall as you are. What are you, 6'3"?
Yeah, 6'5".
6'5".
6'5".
I mean, I'm 6... I'll say 6'1" just to round it up. But it's great to have you here, and thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So I had a bit of a thought in the car just before I saw you get out of the car. I thought, right, I'm just going to go into ChatGPT and I'm going to say, who is Jonathan Handford of Fine & Country? Well, it said Jonathan Handford is a well-known UK luxury estate agent and senior figure within the Fine & Country, a premium homes property brand specialising in high-end homes. It says managing director of Fine & Country. Has that changed recently?
Yeah, so
was it an interim?
I was an interim for last year whilst Nikki Stevenson was away on maternity leave. So she's been back at the helm since January.
Brilliant. What was that like? Being an interim MD of Fine & Country?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was great fun. And obviously, I've worked with Fine & Country for 20 plus years now. Mainly from the coalface as an agent building a business and building a license. But for the last 5 or 6 years, I've had a role as well with head office as a non-exec director, advising the board. And I think I was perceived to be a safe pair of hands whilst Nikki was away to steer the ship ready for her return. But it was great fun. It's a wonderful business, wonderful people, wonderful properties, wonderful clients. And it was a great opportunity, and I cherished every minute. It was great fun.
Were you before? Because 20 years is a long time for anyone in any company these days. But where were you before that? What was your background?
Look, to go right back to grassroots, I was a carpenter. I've come from a family of carpenters, so as a joiner, that's how I trained. And I met somebody in a pub who said within minutes of meeting me, God, you make a great estate agent. You should come in and have a chat to us. So I joined Connells for a very brief period. And after being at Connells for 6 or 7 months, I was headhunted by, I'm sure you'll know, Sean Newman.
Yes.
And Sean coaxed me into going to work with him.
How did he coax you? Come on.
Oh, it's a great story. So at the time at Connells, which is a great company, and I had some great foundational learning and training in place in order to be able to start my career, but the earnings weren't great.
Yeah.
And I'd been headhunted by one of the offshoots, one of the verticals of the Countrywide group to go and be a branch manager in Coventry. And I'd accepted the role, and I was on my way to go and work in Coventry, which is north of my hometown in Leamington Spa. So it was all set at a starting date. I'd handed my notice in with Connells, and then Sean had caught wind that I was leaving Connells in Kenilworth to join this office in Coventry, and he said, I'd like you to come in and have a chat with me. I said, well, I'm more than willing to come in and have a chat with you, but I've already accepted another role and I'm going there. And it was a bizarre set of circumstances because I went there just to placate and humour him rather than with any intention of thinking about accepting a role. And from the moment that I arrived at that office at number 1 Regent Street in Rugby, I was blown off my feet.
Was Newman Properties?
Newman Estate Agents, it was back in the day.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was like the stock exchange in there. The energy from the room was unbelievable. There's people running around with bits of paper. The phones were ringing off the hook. There must have been a dozen people on the shop floor at the time, and as many again out on the road on appointments. And I had to sit and wait for 15 minutes for Sean to come free for my interview. And I just sat there observing the energy in the room, thinking this is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Especially from being a carpenter.
Yes, yeah. It was a different world. It was a completely different world. I'd never used a computer before. So sales, suits, computers, all of those things. Even at Connells, we didn't have a digital camera. We didn't have computers. We had a hot box. We had a telephone, and that was about the limit of the technology that we had available. And you walk into Newman's, and it was like the Starship Enterprise.
So it's all modern and, or sort of like you say, massive office, loads of energy, big buzz. Yeah.
And I went in to have a meeting with Sean, and he talked me through. He did the interview, and he said at the end of it, he said, "Right, I'd like to offer you a job."
Straight on the spot.
Straight on the spot there and then. First day, I thought, "Oh wow, that's brilliant." And I made it abundantly clear from the outset that I was going to this other company. I'd already said yes. He said, "I'm going to offer you a job. I want you to be a trainee estate agent." And I said, "Thank you, but I've already been offered a job. They want me to go and be a branch manager in Coventry." He said, "You're not ready for a branch manager in Coventry." He said, "You're nowhere near enough experienced. You've got loads to learn. This will be better for you in the long run. I want you to come back down to ground zero, and I want you to train. And I want you to be a junior estate agent."
Wow.
And at the time, the basic salary was really low.
Come on, what was it? Can you remember?
I think it was $6,000 a year.
That was my starting basic.
I think it was. Well, we're very similar age-wise, so it's not going to be a million miles apart. But at the time, I remember at Connells, I was getting paid 2% of the fee.
Oh, wow.
My commission.
What was the average fee?
At Connells, it was probably less than £1,000.
Yeah.
But to go to then Newman's, where I was getting 8% of the fee, and our average fee back then was probably between 3.5% and 4%.
Wow.
Was quite significant. I mean, we were charging 2.5% back then, even in 2000. So,
nice.
Which is a horrifically long time. It makes you gulp when you say it out loud. But Sean said, "Look, I'd love you to come and work. I want you to become a trainee estate agent, and you'll learn more here." And I'll never forget the call to my now wife, where I had to explain to her that I turned down a job to become a branch manager.
I'm going to be a junior, the tea boy.
Yeah, to effectively being the whipping boy at the bottom rung of the ladder. But I couldn't explain and convey why that felt like the better of all of the choices.
What do you think it was, though? What was it that
Sean.
made you? Just Sean's, literally his confidence.
Sean. I mean, he's a force of nature.
Yeah.
And he's brooding with confidence. He genuinely cares and wants to help people. And for me, I felt like I was going to be part of something special in terms of a growth journey where, in terms of a corporate structure, and I'm not knocking the corporate structure, I felt like I was just going to be a very small cog in a bigger machine.
Yeah.
Whereas there, I felt like I had more access to better people to learn and to embrace things quicker. And I did, and I opted to take that role. And I'll in terms of a pivotal moment, one of those sliding doors things, it was absolutely the right choice. And I think it expedited my growth through the ranks, and I'm very grateful that I went through that course. So sometimes, the title and all of those things, they're kind of academic. There are other variables that are more important.
Well, I love that story because, I mean, they say you don't leave a bad company, you leave a bad leader. And I would imagine the same can be done in reverse, which is the difference between you going somewhere and joining something with a variable like title, like it's the opposite ends of the scale, really. But it's because of him that made you go, no, he's the right guy for me to work with. Yeah. And I think what I love about what you just said as well is his honesty. Yeah. Because he was probably right. Was that fair to say?
100%. And I'm very grateful for Connells for accelerating my growth through the ranks and giving me the confidence to be able to go out and carry out appraisals and things like that. But it wasn't really until I started at Newman's and worked with other people that you then got a flavour of what good looks like, and some of the bad habits that I'd picked up and some of the things that I then needed to introduce to become, better at my profession. And Sean was absolutely right, and he was confident and brave enough to be able to say it and pull me back down to earth. And
I love that.
I actually think if I'd have gone to the corporate in Coventry and I'd have been a branch manager, I may well have failed because I might have struggled. I'd have been in there on my own. I'd have been setting the pace in terms of the standards, and other people would have been looking up to me within the team and probably thinking, where's this guy's qualifications and mandate to be able to teach others? And really, I didn't have the wisdom or experience to be able to do that. So he was absolutely right. And then I remember when I first started, and the first day they said, right, we don't need to answer the telephones, we don't need to deal with any inquiries, you're in a training program. And a couple of hours in, phone was ringing off the hook. It was really energetic, and I'm looking around thinking, I can't, it's not in my nature to leave a phone ringing unanswered. So I picked up the call, dealt with the inquiry, and I had to, it was a message from one of my colleagues, Anthony. And I remember shouting, I said, right, who's got the message book? And everyone looked around at me and went, email.
Oh, you're like, oh my God, I've arrived. Yeah.
I'm picking up a mouse and holding it to the screen,
Yeah.
pointing it, thinking that's how it works. And but you know, you learn and you adapt very quickly. But yeah, it was a baptism of fire, but one that I'm very grateful for.
Well, I love that story. There's a lot of leadership in there that I want to almost link to. Just before we started rolling the camera, we was talking about football.
Yeah.
And that the Spurs fans have got no right to give me any stick this season. Now, this is probably going to go out during the next 4 or 5 games, which means we could well be going down or they could be going down. But however, as a Man United fan, it's interesting to see how a season can be turned around so quickly. And it literally was overnight, from the old manager to the new interim manager again, coming in and seeing such a significant change. And I think leadership, it passes across everything. So, you know, linking it to that and that kind of story that you just told by you followed Sean, do you see the same really at United at the minute, that the players have just gone, we're going to follow this guy, and the standards and things like that may be quite important at United now compared to maybe where they were? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
You know, and I think alluding to what you said earlier, business never outpaces its leader. So that always sets the pace and the critical standards that everybody adheres to. But as a United fan, and both my parents were United fans, so I was going through a very early age, even though I live in Leamington Spa in the Midlands. And yes, I know that I'll pick up loads of grief for not being from Manchester, which I completely understand. We were season ticket holders, and we used to go in the late 80s when everyone else was Liverpool fans. And all my mates had the candy shirts. Yeah,
that was a very popular kit. Jan Molby used to fill that shirt out quite well, bless him. But yeah.
But again, we weren't that good. But then all of a sudden, we hit this period, and we were season ticket holders from 90 through to 96.
Yeah.
And I sat in the south stand lower next to Gary and Phil Neville's dad, who was Neville Neville.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Like Jemba Jemba.
Yeah,
so good they named him twice. But you got to see what was the birth of this golden age at Manchester United, and it was driven largely from Alex Ferguson's passion, fire, and refusal to be beaten at any stage. And I don't know, we're deviating massively from the topic of estate agency.
We'll come on to estate agency in a minute.
People talk about Man United's DNA, and you hear that all the time, and you hear of these leaders that have come in and have failed to resonate with the fan base and the players because they don't get and understand United's DNA. And a lot of pundits, they relay it back to a playing style. It's not a playing style.
No.
United's DNA is the belief that you can never be beaten. And even if you're 2-0 down with minutes to go, there's still that thing in the back of your head that says, if you stick with it, you persevere, there's a chance that we can still pull this back.
Yeah.
And that's what United's DNA is. And Ferguson and people like Busby, they're the masters at that. They had that belief. And Ruben Amorim, for all of his faults, he actually brought some good players to the club in his time at the helm, but he didn't have that same level of belief where the players were confident and could express themselves. And I think what Carrick has done in a very short space of time, he said, I've seen him interviewed, he said, enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Be appreciative of the fact that you're playing at this wonderful club that, you know, people would give their right arm to have 5 minutes off the bench. let alone be playing week in, week out. And, and he's just instilled that belief. And it's been a pleasure to watch us again, having had so many dark times over recent years.
Yeah.
But like I said, I got to witness that golden age in the 90s, and that level of confidence that you almost, there was a fear of going to Old Trafford because you know that you could be turned over, and we lost that.
There was. I remember, as a West Ham fan, going to Old Trafford was like, well, what can we keep the score to rather than can we actually win the match? But in recent years, you think, play well, we could get a result there. But I think it comes back down to leadership.
Yeah.
Is the point. And having high standards, a DNA, which is very clear from the outset of probably just when they bring players into the club and how important those things are. So if your leader embodies that and they hold those standards to account, then, it becomes very clear for people that join and remain in the club. So I think, fair play to Carrick. Do you think he's going to get their contract?
Look, I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the season. I'd say we're almost, I don't know when this goes out, so I might end up with egg on my face.
It will actually go out sooner because I'm just about to do loads of episodes. So this was probably going to go out next week.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Well, look, as it stands at the minute, I think you'd be fairly confident that we'll get Champions League football. And I think if we went back to the point of his appointment, if you could have said, well, look, if you secure Champions League football, there's a strong chance that you'll get the role full time. And coming back to the DNA thing, and I think this is relevant for our profession.
Yes.
And it ties back into the United's DNA thing. The other thing is the record that we've got of bringing through academy players.
Yeah.
Training the youngsters, bringing them through and making them world beaters.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for what we do. And I'm very grateful that somebody put an arm around me and spent time with me and helped me to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And it's something that I still carry really close to my heart now. And I've got some world beaters in the wings coming through.
That's good to hear.
That is one of my biggest enjoyments of the job, is watching people grow, learn, and looking at the success that they achieve and what it means to them. And there's a girl in Leamington at the minute called Amrita, and she is going to be world class. I just know it because of her work ethic, the effort that she puts in, how she embraces new stuff. And, I love to see that.
Yeah.
You compare with people like Kobe Mainu, who Amorim was sort of sidelining. It was looking like he was going to leave.
He was going to leave, yeah.
And all of a sudden, Carrick's come in and nurtured
straight
him.
in the team.
And he's talking about a 5-year contract. Yeah. And you think that's back to United's DNA of nurturing the academy players and bringing them through and making them world beaters. And I think that's a really important part of leadership.
I definitely do. And I'm just going back, so linking it back to what we're talking about in our industry, I worry whether there is enough new, younger blood coming into the industry. As in, I started when I was turning 20. You obviously were starting...
Yeah, it's similar sort of age.
And... that reliance on having such a great leader and a great training process was absolutely pivotal in the success of yourself, and I can attribute that as well. Do you feel like the industry is attracting that younger talent at the moment?
So there has been a seismic shift in the dynamic of remuneration for agents, which has a bearing upon people's ability to be able to start the job with no experience.
Yeah.
Because if you're self-employed, there is a period where you might be eating what you kill, whereas we would come in with training packages and almost YTS schemes effectively.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to have a bearing upon the new ones coming through. But I think the elephant in the room, which we failed to address as a profession for so long, is the requirement for minimum standards of learning and a license to practice.
Yeah.
And if there was a clear training plan for people, you wouldn't have this sink or swim attitude where people come in, they start, they struggle, they leave. If they had all of the tools and knowledge in order to be able to succeed, I think you would have a much better success rate and a much lower dropout rate. And I think that then individuals would be more willing to take this as a profession. And I think, excuse me, both of us have done a lot of training.
Yeah.
I've trained rooms of hundreds and hundreds of agents. I guarantee you, in most instances, you could stand in front of an audience of 300 estate agents, say, put your hand up. If you left school thinking, I want a career in real estate, less than 5% will put their hand
Yeah,
up.
for sure.
Because most people end up falling upon it as a profession rather than it being their sector.
Yeah, same like we did. I was a footballer. You were a carpenter.
So you played, did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was at Peterborough United until I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a just didn't have the right attitude. If I go back and I had a few, we had a few challenges. I lost my brother when he was 21, around the same time as I was wobbling in my career. But I had a great full season in the reserves, and the youth team got to I think it was the semi-finals of the FA Youth Cup at the time, which was unusual for a club of our size. But we were equivalent of a championship club today, Division 1. Peterborough United were in Division 1. So we were playing like to Newcastle and those types of teams. And it was a great environment to be in to a degree. It was hard. It was all, it was really hard. Like, it was brutal. Like the way the first team were and the kind of the things that people got up to and the way, you were a bit of a skivvy at times and everything else. But, I look back at that and think that helped me a hell of a lot, building a lot of resilience in those 2.5 years at Peterborough. But going back to sort of like the training side of things and the standards and the DNA, I think that's something that I think this industry is for a lot more people than people from the outside would even realise. I certainly feel like sales can be seen from the outside as like, because you don't strike me as someone that's going to go out there and try and put people under pressure.
No.
And you don't strike me as someone who thinks it's all about the commission. And that's where I see the best people in our industry is they have the opposite view of that. They work with clients, understand. They watched a video of yours yesterday, and I only done one. I filmed a video talking about trust, and the key component of trust is listening. You've done a video on listening. And so not talking, listening, leaning in, taking in the information. And you think about that as a skill in our industry and how important it is. That's actually it's quite a good thing for people to understand when they look from the outside in, that it's not just about commission hungry people. It's not about closing as many deals as possible. Those things, of course, the numbers matter in any business. But actually, if you get the basics right and the core ingredients right, you can actually have an incredible career in this industry. And it's not the one that I think from the outside looking in, people realise.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like you said, there are people that would be brilliant at this profession. I'm sure if you think of your team and the people within it, and you think of the careers that they had prior to transitioning through to real estate, it will be a very eclectic mix of professions.
Totally.
Rather than, somebody's good in service, therefore they're going to work well as an estate agent. And I find that that's really common. And you talk about listening. Most estate agents could talk a dog off a meat wagon.
Well, it's that old saying, isn't it? You can sell ice to an Eskimo and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not really what makes a great agent.
Consultation.
Yeah.
So you talk about listening as the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And really, if you're on a consultation with either a buyer or a seller, you really want to spend 20% of the time talking, and you want them to be talking 80% of the time. And I think that you can utilize that when you're looking at consultation with potentially a buyer or a seller. And I think if you spend 20% of the time talking and they spend 80% of the time talking, you'll find out much more about them and what their needs are and how you can help them. If you do the reverse of that, you're just forcing what you think is right and what your narrative is into their circumstances. And it's all about asking the right questions, totally. Understanding, identifying their needs, and then working out where you can guide them and navigate them through the process. And I come back to the point that you made about the commission. And I think we've lost our way a little bit where, agents have got very greedy. Now, I'm all for charging the right fee.
Agreed.
And I think we can be perceived as expensive by some.
Yeah.
I think we're really good value for money, and I insist upon 2 to 2.5% subject to the circumstances, which in some parts of the world where Fine and Country represent their sellers, it can be as much as 10%. In the UK, we pay a lot less. But I would rather have 5 instructions at 2% than 10 at 1%,
Yeah.
because I'll be far more attentive. I'll be far more engaged. I'll be far more available for 5 sellers than I ever can be for 10.
Yeah.
I'll do a better job, and I've got a better chance of getting them the result that they need. So it's not all about commission. It's about the service that you deliver and making sure that you fulfill your obligations and do the best possible job. And I think our industry has been dumbed down to the lowest common denominator. And, there are a lot of people that are unhappy with their agent.
Yeah.
But the further that you drive it down,
Yeah.
the less of the service that you're going to get.
Yeah.
And, there's a place for every type of model.
Yeah.
But actually the niche that we work in
Yeah.
is somebody that wants a consultant. They want that concierge level of service. They want a safe and trusted pair of hands that know and understand what the seller needs.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of the market that I've managed to work in. And, the best fit for me for that was with Fine and Country.
When you got into that market, what was your thought process? Because obviously, so when you were in Newman's, was it like in the resi part of the business, and then you took the step into the Fine and Country?
Yeah, so look, it's a good question. So if I go back to Newman's and the days at Newman's, we had really good business. We had a few different locations, one of which was my hometown in Leamington Spa. And there are 4 parts to the market as I see it. You've got the whole market, 0 to 100%. 0 to 75% is the mass market.
Yeah.
The top 25% is the upper quartile.
Yeah.
The top 10% is the prime,
Yeah.
and the top 1% is the super prime. And people think super prime is restricted to central London and Manhattan. It's not. There's a super prime to Peterborough and Leamington Spa.
Yeah.
There is always the most expensive property. So we at Newman's, we were really great in the mass market, but
Yeah.
we really struggled to get into the upper quartile. And, we used to put our pie chart with, how many properties we'd sold, and we were comfortable market leaders. And then there'd be a property that would come onto the market. We think, well, why haven't they called us?
Yeah.
And it used to break my heart. And I think we'd be the best place to help them with that.
Yeah.
But the type of seller selling that type of property, they want to deal with a specialist
Yeah.
that works in that part of the market. And it was only then when we partnered with Fine and Country that then we started to get calls. And immediately afterwards, we said, well, actually, we're going to distance ourselves from Newman's, and we're going to open Fine and Country and then specialise in that part of the market. And, the rest is history.
Well, it really is. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, what do you find though, like with agents, that they see a brand, let's call it Fine and Country for argument's sake, and they think once they've strapped that brand on, the rest is going to look after itself, when realistically there's a hell of a lot of work that needs to be done. And you could be, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'd love you to tell me what in your experience that is. It could probably take 3 to 5 years realistically of building that reputation in that market, because you have such traditional, long-standing agents in that marketplace who are maybe like Stratton Parker, Savills, those kind of places. So taking the brand and the assets and the license, for argument's sake, doesn't solve that predicament of getting those listings straight away.
Yeah, look, there are no silver bullets.
No, definitely not.
If you're out there thinking there is, you're going to be you're going to be sadly mistaken. And you named a few agents there. I don't think anybody has a divine right to sit at the top of the table.
No.
You will only achieve that through hard work, perseverance, innovation, adapting your working model, embracing new technologies, and all of those different things. And in terms of how long does it take to build trust within your market space so that people look? Now, you're absolutely right. And if you look at Leamington Spa as an example, where we were one of the pioneers with Fine and Country, one of the first licenses in the country, and there's many other really good ones, but it took a while to carve that niche and actually to topple some of the bigger boys that have been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And their name was synonymous with that part of the market. So it did take time. However, you look at Fine and Country now, we've been recognised for 3 consecutive years as via YouGov as the most recommended brand.
Yeah.
So you can ride the tailcoats of some of the other locations' success, but even with that, it's still not going to be a success. And you could have 2 neighbouring licenses. one that embraces all the tools, does it really successful, and one a road away that actually they've got the brand, but they don't use it the right way. And unfortunately, they don't have the same degree of success. So the brand is critically important, but the people at the steering wheel are also really important.
That combination, isn't it?
Yeah, and recognising service standards and delivering upon them, making sure that they've got the right moral compass, working for their seller rather than for themselves. All of these things are critically important.
How do you police that?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us a bit more about that, because I think standards, we talked about that in football clubs.
Yeah.
And when Sean hired you at the start, how do you maintain that as a network grows? I mean, I suppose I'm linking it to the mass market. Let's talk EXP just briefly, but they've exploded over the last 5 years. And I would imagine one of their biggest challenges, albeit I don't think they're as concerned about that as maybe the likes of Fine and Country. But how do you get that standard replicated and that kind of buy-in to do the right things, which you're referring to?
So we turn down a lot more people than we accept.
Like it.
In its easiest term, there are a lot of people where it's an aspirational thing. They want to be part of it, but if they've not got the right experience, if they've not got the right work ethic, if we don't think they're going to be a right fit, then actually they don't get to partner with Fine and Country. So there's some standards that we hold really close. There's brand guidelines. There's there are standards that we put into place. We've got a national advisory council.
Yeah.
We've got a team of representatives that cover each region that dictate the rules and that we all adhere by, and they constantly update, and and it's for the good of the brand and for the good of the network, because you don't want rogue operators. Because when you've got and it's not just a local, regional, or national brand now, it's a full-on international brand.
Yeah,
6 continents worldwide.
That's been quite rapid as well, isn't it?
Considering it's only our 25th anniversary this year, so it's in 25 years, it's stellar in terms of its growth. But you're at the mercy of the work that your neighbour does, and if they bring the brand into disrepute, everybody's affected by it. So it's really important that you've got those standards that you hold close to you. I hate to use another footballing analogy.
I was thinking of one.
Garnacho, in terms of United. And again, he's not somebody that I think upheld the United standards, and it's why he was ridiculed when United beat Chelsea the other day by some of the other players, because he went rogue. He was, I think there was talk that he was leaking the team in advance of games. And that's a bad egg. Yeah. And you're going to be judged by the bad egg, and you've got that spectrum of standards from your best to your worst, and unfortunately, the worst is going to bring you down. So and there have been people that we've ejected from the brand if they've not delivered the service standards that we expect. So,
but I like that about the advisory board and having people within the group empowering those standards. It goes back to the football analogy in the dressing room.
Captain
Roy Keane brings to mind, at United, he would not tolerate. And that, I think, is where you're getting things right, when you've got many leaders within the network or the team. So good. I'll put some questions together for you. I mean, we've already 3/4 of the way through it, but I mean, we'll carry on for as long as we need to. But when you sort of moved through the levels, because being an agent, I think, requires a different set of skills than leading agents. What did you have to unlearn from being a really successful agent, which you clearly were, to then leading agents in the brand?
So up until the point where I stepped in as interim, I was still on the coalface.
Yeah.
So I was still out in the muck and bullets of battle, listing and selling houses, both for sale and for rent. So I think there is a world where the two can be synonymous with each other, and you don't have to specialise in one or the other. And sometimes, and you just used Roy Keane as an example, so I'll loop back to it, you can lead by example. You can show people what good looks like. Yeah. And if there is a certain standard to the way that you work, and other people can aspire to that. It's that Napoleon tactic. I won't tell you to go through them. I'll go through them myself, and you can follow me, and this is what it looks like. So leading people is challenging, and there are certain skills that you need in order to be able to do that. And there are certain people I think are great agents that couldn't also do the leadership piece. Being able to do both is hard, because in its very nature, sometimes you've got to be a bit greedy and selfish to be a successful sales agent.
Yeah.
And being a manager, well, there's two things actually. There's managers and there's leaders. And a manager is a micromanager, managing data, figures, other things. A leader is inspirational. They're gonna, give people a vision of what the future looks like, and encourage people to follow that path. Management is pulling people up when they fall short of the standards, and
making sure,
so I guess there's three skill sets. There's being an agent, there's being a manager, and there's being a leader, and you've got to sort of circumnavigate around the three of them and do it skillfully. But
do you still do a bit on the front?
I at the minute I just haven't got the time.
No.
So and it's heartbreaking, because I still get calls, I still get referrals, I still get requests to get involved, but it's a struggle to police my time effectively.
How do you manage that when you've got those kind of relationships? I'm taking it that it's like, especially the type of man you are, I get the feeling that you would want to go and make sure that you were into that relationship and continuing it.
It's hard, but I'm eternally grateful. So locally to me in Leamington Spa, there's 6 people that work in that team. The last 2 that we lost from that team, the last 3, we lost them to retirement. So it's been a steady ship and a consistent one for many years. So they're a very safe pair of hands if I need to pass over a leader inquiry to.
It says a lot as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, as heartbreaking as it is, actually, I know that they're going to a good place. But I think because I was at the coalface for so long, it kept me sharp and relevant, rather than leading from an ivory tower when you're talking to other people and you're talking to potential licenses about the possibility of joining Fine and Country. I could speak from a position of experience, saying, this is what good looks like, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to do it. Well, who are you to tell me that? Well, this is what we've done with our businesses, and this is where we've had the success. And the one element that we've not touched upon is it's the most enjoyable part of the job, because that feeling from somebody being confident enough to give you the mandate to represent them as an ambassador in the sale of their luxury home it's a great feeling that they think that you're the best bet. And I take that incredibly seriously, and I miss not getting those phone calls because I'm not there anymore. So are you still involved yourself? Are you still
very rarely, but I've had moments where I've dipped in and dipped out. But with what we're kind of creating, it's actually to make sure we lift and elevate the agents. So in a similar way, but just with our brand in more of the mid-market.
Yeah.
But it's, of course you do. Those moments where you leave a house and you've just spent time talking through offers, and you close the door on the way out, you get in your car, you stick the music on full blast, and you're like, fucking get in there. But you're really happy because of the outcome for the client.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I think the people that are genuinely successful in this industry, they do have that kind of mindset about how they can help someone genuinely achieve their goal first. And the better they are at doing that, they will achieve theirs in the same time.
Their success is a byproduct of helping the people that they're representing.
Yeah.
And I think that empathy, that degree of care is so important. That they
teach. I was talking about this in an interview yesterday. I don't think care can be taught.
Probably not. It's one of those things. It's either intrinsic. It's it's a part of your nature.
Yeah, I think it's like I've tried, failed, backed a few people on words, not behaviours over the years. In fact, loads, because you make mistakes, and you kind of gradually get to realise, who do I work best with, and who's the brand going to be good for, the training, etc. And you do get to realise, have you found over the years you've backed the wrong people, and then you've gone, okay, what happened there?
Anyone that says that they haven't is either kidding themselves or a liar.
Yeah.
Alex Ferguson has picked the wrong people over the years, and if he's one of the most decorated managers of all times, then that says everything that you need to know. And, and people can interview very well, but then in terms of what they do on the coalface can be very different. So,
But you can end up, because you want it sometimes, you can end up wanting it more for that person than perhaps they do themselves, or there's that kind of, you really wanted it to work for them, and that frustration when they're not doing the things they need to do or behaving in a way that they need to behave. How does that land with you?
yeah, look. So there's a great real estate trainer in America, a guy called David Knox, and he says, you better to have an empty kennel than a dead dog.
Yeah.
Which is really harsh. But
yeah.
So, and again, from the National Association of Realtors conference, there was another seminar that I went to that I picked up a great acronym for interviewing people, and it's called CLAMS. And you get them to write on a piece of paper in front of you: challenge, location, advancement, money, and security. And you get them to number them from 1 to 5 in order of the most important within their career. And there's no right or wrong answers to this, but it gets them thinking about their priorities.
Yeah.
And then you ask them to expand upon their answers. So when they talk about challenge, you get them to talk about their achievements inside and out of work, and those two categories will open up how much care and passion they've got, and what their achievements are, and what they've done. Location just gives you an idea of geography and how far they're prepared to travel. Advancement, you ask them what success looks like. Where do you want to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? And it will get an idea of their vision and their aspiration and ambition. Money, you ask for their financial blueprint. What have they earned in the past? What their expectations of earnings moving forward? And then security, it's what job security means to them and what that looks like. And by structuring a conversation in that way, you can really get underneath the skin of a candidate and find out quite a lot about them. And then one of the questions that I always ask, and I think you'll love this, is give me an example of an occasion when you've bent the rules to get something done.
Yeah.
And it's quite an open question.
It is.
Some of the answers,
it's a great question.
Some of the answers that I've had to that question would horrify you.
Yeah.
And you just know straight away, well, actually, if that's what you're prepared to do, you're not going to be a safe bet as an ambassador of my business. So it's a really good question, but you never know. And there are people that can be the opposite, where you think, I'm not quite sure if you're right or if you've got the right attitude, if you'll be received well by a potential seller, but you're worth a bit of a bet, and have actually gone on to be an absolute top performer.
Yeah.
And then there's others where you think that's as good as an interview as I've ever done, and then 3 months in they've crashed and burnt because they talk a very good game but then fail to deliver upon it.
Yeah. It's a very hard science to get right, recruitment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, like you say, because people can interview brilliantly, and you really only get to see who somebody is. It's like driving, isn't it? You pass your test and then you learn, And it's the same with a lot of people coming into agency, because you really have to have those core ingredients. And what would you put those core ingredients for the top performers? Now you've been working in this industry for such a long time, and you've seen the best of the best. You mentioned Sean, the lady in Leamington.
Amrita. Yeah.
When you think about it, it's certainly in the premium market, in that upper quartile, because, there's a lot of distortion online. Social media presents a very lovely image of what working in the super prime, the prime market, premium market sector looks like. It's funny, I was talking to a lady who works for a very well-known brokerage in London in the super prime market. And she was saying how it's very challenging. It's not all the Instagram reels and stories, But what would you put, if there was 2 or 3 key characteristics that make those top people stand out? What are they, in your opinion?
So it's a great question. And my answer, I think, is probably going to surprise you, where there is no set formula for success. Because what you might find in 3 ingredients in one individual who is super successful, another person doesn't have any of them. They've got 3 of their own, and they're also super successful. And I look at the agents across the Fine and Country network, and the best of them can differ so wildly. Some of the consistent themes, tenacity,
Yeah.
I think is critically important. Having broad shoulders and being able to deal with rejection, being open to embrace new ideas and new technologies, because if you don't, you'll be perfectly equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists.
Yeah.
I think proactivity, you can't, there is going to be absolutely nothing handed to you in this industry.
Yeah.
You've got to go out and fight for it. And if you haven't got that work ethic to be able to be disciplined, to be up early, working late, and to have your sleeves rolled up, I think you'll struggle, because there are going to be too many people out there hungrier than you that are going to leapfrog you. So if you expect to come in and just sit on your hands and wait for the phone to ring and for people to come to you, or for you to put a reel out there and you're going to conquer the world, you're sadly mistaken. And I think, in fact, no, maybe there is one. Maybe there is one. I think you got to love what you do.
Well, I get that from you, and you're however many years into this. I can see it in your eyes. I can see you love what you do, and I think you probably got that from Sean when you first met him as well. And I think, again, it's like that care element. You do need to love it. It's a very rewarding industry for those who do. Yeah, I love that. I think it's a really good answer.
But it can be, for want of a better word, a bit of a bastard.
Yeah.
There are people that can put a lot of time and effort into a sale, a listing, and I liken it to a Venn diagram where you've got the buyer and the seller, and your job as agents is to cross these two circles over. And when you've crossed them over, you've got that sweet spot in the middle where you've got the deal.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like the conveyancing is the process to pull those two bits apart, and you're there in the middle, holding it for dear life, trying to get it across the finishing line. And there are things that can happen that are outside of your circle of influence that you've had absolutely no control over, that can kibosh your sale. And we're one of those very few professions that works for free.
I know,
and
it's crazy.
And it can be a bit horrible. And you think, Jesus, I've dedicated 6 months of my life to this, and I've now got to reset the clock.
It's
pucker up and keep and persevere. And
it's
do
unbelievable,
it all again.
isn't it? That literally, and let's be honest, in the upper quartile, it can often be 12 months.
Yeah.
By the time the deal completes. I was thinking about what you just said then about modern technology and things like that, because AI is huge, as you know, and I've spent a lot of time talking about it on the show, so I don't want to go into it massively. But when you're in a network and you've got a lot of established agents that you've got, and some fantastic brands that work around you that have probably got licenses, or experienced agents that have took partnerships or whichever, how do you see their appetite generally for onboarding social media, but more so the newest one, AI?
What, from the agents on the front line?
Yeah, agents on front line. So I mean, we're in a very fast-paced, changing, challenging climate, and I think you said you kind of got to go. You got to learn this stuff. You've got to be interested in improving what you do.
So look, there's obviously two questions. There's the social media, and then there's the AI. And I'll come back to AI again in a second. And if you look at social media, I was only talking about this the other day. I was filming at Digital Spark Studio with Ben and his team, and there was a load of people there that had been in the industry for 25 plus years. And we were talking about the olden days when we had black and white newspaper adverts. We didn't have digital cameras. We had a wooden meter rule for measuring properties.
I remember that. I remember that.
And if you'd have pulled that John Handford to the side and said, right, John, this is your career moving forward, a few years from now, it's going to be a requirement for you to be on camera.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to talk and present, and you're going to have to do that day in, day out as the very fabric of your job. I'd have said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. I'll go back to knocking in nails for a living, because that's my safe space. And it's amazing how much the industry is involved in such a short space of time that, almost doing Jerry Bruckheimer level productions for properties, and you're doing multiple assets per property that you put on the market. And it's a necessary evil. Yeah. And I'll say this will put a smile on your face, because again, it was Ben that mentioned this in one of our training sessions a couple of years ago. He said, our local rag it used to cost £500 a page to put a property advert in. And there was instances where you'd have 2, 3, 4 pages, you'd be spending £2,000. He said, now I can reach 100,000 people with one video based upon the quality of the content that I put together, and it doesn't cost me anything other than a little bit of production. So I'll reach a far bigger audience, much more relevant. It can then attract me followers, but it requires effort rather than the investment in order to be able to produce that quality content. And, you know, it's absolutely right. But there are agents still out there relying upon newspaper adverts in the local rags because that's all that they've ever done. So if you don't evolve, you won't continue to get what you've always got. You'll cease to exist.
Yeah.
Because you'll just become irrelevant.
It's gone that fast, hasn't it?
And you know, and you've got to be so up to speed with it in terms of what the future looks like. And you've got to be out there constantly looking for new ways. And it's why you've got to love what you do. You've got to be doing it in the evenings and weekends because you haven't got time in the day job. And then coming back to AI, there's a great thing that I heard a year ago where somebody said, look, you won't lose your job to AI, but you're in danger of losing your job to somebody that will use AI better than you.
Yeah.
And there are so many tools out there now. And it is important that you harness them because it's going to make you more efficient with what you do and reach more people and do it in a more expeditious fashion than you could just work in the traditional way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. And I think it can feel quite overwhelming because of the amount of things that are being fired at business owners, agents, day-to-day, prop tech. I mean, everyone's got a solution for maybe a challenge that's not really there sometimes, you know. So I think it's definitely harnessing something that leverages you in this industry. So, good AI should get you in more conversations, for argument.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, look, we've faced a smile on our face as well, going back 25 years. Do you remember when you used to be able to go to an appraisal at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning and you'd have it on the market by the afternoon?
Oh, my God.
And now there
you'd
are
even
two
have
things.
The camera with you. You'd be like, right, let me. One of my closing tactics, Bertie, was get the old digital. When you got a digital camera, it was like you'd made it, right? Because you used to have to get them developed, Bertie. Now you won't know what that means, do you? And then you go and get the photos back 3 or 4 days later, and some have been blown or whatever the bloody word was.
Or you got the vendor in the window upstairs looking through.
Cat in the, you know. But you got your digital camera. You go to, right, Jonathan. Look, have a look. Do you want that photo online? And they'll go, oh yeah. Or do you want that photo in the paper? It's like, well, they've already given me the instruction now. See, so the digital camera was like a big deal. But then you'd have a measuring the ruler, the meter rule, which you'd unfold to measure the room. And you're looking over it going, I think that's about right. And it was just unbelievable, wasn't it? Like the lack of, I suppose, technology, but I don't know.
But you didn't have the same blockers though, did you? Because if you think, like I said,
you'd be on the market in 2 hours.
Appraisal on a Monday, 10 o'clock, on by the afternoon. Now you've got the legislative blockers.
Yeah, that's massive.
And then you've got the marketing. So the job is becoming harder. You know, you've got EPCs, KYC, you've got compliance, all those bits. You know, as before you'd have a marketing agreement, a mandate, which has obviously been a requirement since 79, but you could do that there and then on the property. Now there's so many things that you have to do and you have to get right to make sure that you don't fall short of the law. So that in its own right, the legislative stuff is a challenge and an obstacle.
Yeah.
But then you think, oh God, no, I've got to do all this extra marketing on top. Can I not just put it on and call a few people? Well, no, you need the EPC, you need the photographs, you need the floor plan. That's so true. And you know, you talked about sometimes it can be 12 months to get a property across the line in the upper quartile. It can take you a month to get it on the market.
Yeah.
By the time
you're getting everything back.
And managing a vendor's expectations where they say, right, we want it on tomorrow. And you say, no, we need to hold off for all of these reasons. We've got to get it right. We only get one chance to launch to market.
Yeah.
And we want to give you the best possible chance of selling. So I think the job has become harder because of a lot of things and then easier because of a lot of things. But
it's choosing the right things, isn't it? Ultimately. Some of it, like you said, with the compliance stuff. But I suppose I don't know, this just occurred to me while I was talking that some of these things that may feel a little bit of an inconvenience might be the very thing that helps us to professionalize the elements where maybe we can start to move towards. And I know Ian Preston's been talking a lot about flexi fees. whereby, the client will get an opportunity to decide how much they pay up front and then how much comes off the end and that kind of stuff. I think that because of the amount now that the clients are being asked for at the start, including the amount of investment the agents are making in production, you just mentioned like the types of videos that people are putting together, they're off the charts. It's like a feature film, isn't it, of high quality content. But you could be spending a couple of grand really getting a house to market, and it's a risk.
It's a risk, but it's a necessity. It's a necessity. So I'll give you an example. We've just sold a place in South London for 20 million.
Nice.
Buyer come from TikTok.
Wow.
So I mean, but the level of production that went into capturing that property, I think the upfront fee was in the realms of £5,500 just for the video productions. But you're not just posting it to a property portal. You're posting it to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, because your buyer could come from any one of those sources, and it's fishing with a net rather than a line. And actually, a property of that ilk, it's essential. But trying to convince a seller of that when they've got other agents that say, "Oh, don't worry about that. We don't need that." And it's fine. We can operate without it, but it's like asking me to do my job with one hand tied behind my back. It's like a carpenter working without power tools. Well, the tools are there, but you've got to invest in them and you've got to use them, and you'll get the job done quicker and be more efficient and do a better job.
Oh,
so
100%. And I think that, every seller wants the best price. The only time you get the best price is when the best buyer gets to see it. And they get to see it, they get to view it, and then you've got that buyer in the hands of a professional, where they understand how to use emotion and logic to negotiate the best price. So when it comes to finding the best buyer, especially in the upper quartile, those tools are essential, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, your buyer could come locally, regionally, nationally, internationally. They could come from any one of those 4 locations, and your campaign's got to be able to reach them in their appropriate marketplace. So, but yeah, there's, and again, it's hard because how do you decipher between noise and doing stuff for the sake of it, or between actually doing stuff that matters and is going to bring in leads? And there's a lot of time wasted on things that are irrelevant. But sometimes you roll a dice and you do it and you don't get anything from that, but then you produce a buyer from a TikTok video, which, I mean, it's like, you think 5 years ago it was crop top wearing teenagers doing dancing. Or Simon Whale doing crop top.
It's definitely Simon Whale. You've met Simon Whale. So, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? It's been a really great conversation. I could carry on for ages, but I had a few other questions that I wanted to ask you, because, when you're in leadership or when you're in a commission kind of environment, you can have those nights where things just keep you awake. Have you had those nights before?
Who hasn't?
Exactly. I had one last night, but it wasn't to do with that. It was to do with my tummy. It wasn't very well last night. Not quite sure what was going on. But what keeps you awake at night?
You talked about the different qualities of different agents, and I'm undiagnosed, but almost certainly ADHD. And I will carry my biggest issues like burdens to bed with me, and I'll sit them and I'll play them over and over in my head to the point my wife will say, "Talking in your sleep, can you shut up? You're keeping me awake." And I'll be playing scenarios over in my head that have happened that day that I could have done differently, and then I'll be thinking of the next day in terms of how I can tackle them with a range of different variations. And I can lose 2 or 3 hours just in a loop going over the same things. So I think that you've got the burden of being a business owner, and then you've got the burden of carrying the individual sales that you're working with. And, I'll make this abundantly clear to people when they come and do an interview with us, that you are on call your entire life as an estate agent. Whenever somebody's got an emergency is when they're going to need you. So if you think that you can tap out at 6 o'clock and you're done till Monday morning, you're going to be mistaken, because things will occur and things will happen. And if a buyer pulls the plug on a Sunday at 4 p.m, you need to spring into action that evening to reassure that vendor that you're on it and that you've got solutions back in place and that you're going to get them back on track again. So I don't think it's just the burdens of being self-employed. I think that you also carry the responsibility of each of the individual transactions that you work with. Now, you will either love that and thrive on it, or you will absolutely hate it. And I think that can be the difference between people surviving and thriving within this industry, or failing and stepping away.
You get reward for those moments, though, don't you?
I think so, yeah. If you do it properly and you get it back on track.
You know, those calls you don't want to make and the conversations you don't want to have, they very often come with an outcome which is positive.
Yeah.
You know, whether you've learned something, or whether you've had that big chat, that big conversation, but you knew you had to have it. It was the right thing to do, and all of those things. And, I always believe you're only one conversation away from a solution with most things, and if you have that mindset, it is just then one conversation. You can prepare for that. But estate agency is it's a tough gig. It can batter you, it can pull you around, but it can also give you a lifestyle and a way of living which is truly incredible. And I think that's what I'm seeing with yourself today.
Yeah, look, and if you enjoy it and if you thrive upon it, you don't see those as challenges. They're opportunities to shine and to step up.
I think that's where we are now.
Where you're up against it, your back's up against the wall. You're going to fight for it. We go back to the United DNA thing in your mentality.
Yeah.
But if I look back over 25 years, I've agreed sales on ski slopes in Val d'Isere and Teen. As my calls come in, I've got my headphones in, I've pulled aside, I'm thinking, buyer's coming back and making an offer. I've pulled to the side and I've taken that call there and then to deal with it. And I've taken and negotiated an offer and then put it to the vendor. Now, if you're less engaged and you're not as bothered, you can sit tight and wait and deal with that later, or when you get back from holiday, but you might lose that opportunity. That's the difference between an outstanding and an average agent. Yeah. I've done it from the top of Riyadh in Morocco. I've done it on in all sorts of places. And some people might look at that and go, actually, that's a bit sad. You've got to have that balance between a work and a social life. Well, I think the best agents, it's not one or the other. No. It's a blend of both of them. And, it is what you do. I agree. You've got to be all in. Yeah.
I think you've got to be all in. And all in means, you can have days when you're not on the slopes, you're not doing deals here, there and everywhere. And you actually can say, do you know what, I'm going to take some time out and it's just working with that mindset. Finding Country's been established for a very long time, over 20 years, as we said. Is it 25 years?
25 years, so our anniversary this
25 years. What's the next 5 years look like for Finding Country?
So international growth, I think, is going to be the next significant steps. We're in 300 locations worldwide. We're on 6 continents. In the last few months, we've gone into South America. We've gone into Uruguay, Punta del Este and Montevideo. I've got a meeting this afternoon with South America, actually. There are lots of other discussions with other locations in and around Europe and Asia, where we'll hopefully be opening new branches and new partnerships. So I think that Finding Country now is really about taking it to that next step and going global.
Well, I want to wish you every success.
Thank you.
It's been, as a Finding Country where I live in St Neots, and it's always been strong. It's always done really, really well. And I think Richard's in that one, a good guy. And, I certainly have the utmost respect for what you guys have achieved and what you're doing. And it's really been a pleasure meeting you today as well. It's been a really nice conversation.
Thank you. It's been good fun.
Yeah, it's really good. And is there any questions that I haven't asked that you'd like me to have asked you before we wrap up?
No, I'm not. If you're comfortable, I'm comfortable. I think, I'll be guided by you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for watching. If you want to get hold of Jonathan and reach out and find out more about either Finding Country or anything else, where's the best place to find you?
I'll put my social media details within the links, and you can contact me direct. I'm happy to talk about opportunities within Finding Country, both domestically and internationally. Or if anybody's new on their journey within the world of estate agency and wants some advice and guidance, I'm always there and happy to help.
Doesn't get any better than that. Like, follow, subscribe, and all of that wonderful stuff. And I'll see you on the next one.